We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Yud Ches Amud Aleph and Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 118a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was dealing with a case where a person steals a field and the field is flooded by water. The Chachamim say that the Gazlan can just say Harei shel chalafanecha, take back what is yours. But Rabbi Eliezer says no, he has to provide a new field. And the Gemara explained on the previous Amud that the machlokus is whether or not it's possible to steal a field like it's possible to steal other items. But the Gemara then asked, we seem to have the exact same machlokus by a parah, by a cow, so how could that be? If the machlokus is particular to whether or not land can be stolen, why is there the same machlokus when it comes to a cow? And the Gemara explains also in that brisa by the cow, the case actually is where the person stole a field, and then there was a parah revutza bo, there was a cow that was lying on that field, so essentially you didn't do a kinyan on the cow, so to speak. The Gazlan didn't physically take the cow, the Gazlan physically took the field, and thereby he took the cow as well. And so then the same thing happened, Vishat Fanar, then the river came and flooded it, and essentially it destroyed, so to speak, the cow. So that's the exact same machlokus. Rabbi Elazar l'taimei v'Rabbanan l'tamai. Rabbi Elazar is following his opinion that the cow is considered to be stolen just like the land is considered to be stolen in the same halachas, with all of the same halachas of regular items being stolen. But the Rabbanan say no, since you stole the cow through stealing the land, and land cannot be stolen in the same way as other items, so too in this case the cow was not stolen in the same way that other items are stolen, and that's why according to the Rabbanan, a person just says Harei shel chalafanecha. Rashi explains parah revutza v'gazlan lo mashcha. Again, the case is the Gazlan, he never actually pulled the cow. He didn't do the typical stealing of the cow. V'havik karkos, it's essentially the same as stealing karka, as stealing land. Well, Rabbi Elazar de Amar Sadin Exelis, according to Rabbi Elazar, who says a field can be stolen, kona para ima, so then he acquires the cow together with it. V'chayiv l'shalim, and he'd have to pay the metaltlin niknin agav karka, because the movable objects can be acquired through the land. Well, the Rabbanan lo kana sada v'lo para shabbat. Now, according to the Rabbanan, he doesn't acquire the field, and he doesn't acquire the cow that is within the field. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hagozel es chaveru, if somebody steals from his friend, o she'il v'heimenu, or he borrows from him, o shehifkid lo, or let's say the person gives him a deposit, b'yishuv, if this happens in the city, lo yachzer lo b'midbar, he can't return the item or the money to him in the midbar, in the wilderness, al menas lotzes b'midbar, but if it happened on the condition that he was going out to the midbar, so then yachzer lo b'midbar, so then he is allowed to return the item or the money to him in the midbar, in the wilderness. And Rashi explains, lo yachzer lo b'midbar, he shouldn't return it to him in the midbar, meaning to say, imein zetovo, if the person's not claiming it from him in the midbar, the person's not requesting it in the midbar, so ein ze yachol lachufo lekabel chovo, the person can't force him to accept back his debt, o pikdono, or to accept back his pikadon, but midbar, in the wilderness, the lav makom shimuru, that's not a place where it can be well protected, that's not considered as a good returning of the item. Al menas lotzes b'midbar, but let's say it was done on the condition to go to the wilderness, and Rashi says, kasal kadaytach, right now we think, Sha'amar lo lova, that the lova said, Sha'amar lo lova said that this borrower said, Al menas sheneitze lemidbar, this is on condition that we go to the midbar, V'sham eferlach, and that's where I'll pay you back. And so that's why, says Rashi, L'hachi parach. Now, if that's the understanding, that's why the Gemara actually asks on this, Pshita, that seems so obvious, that was the condition. V'hamasna behedya l'kavla b'midbar, if they made an explicit condition that he's going to accept it back in the midbar, of course that would be okay. That's why the Gemara, according to its initial understanding of this last line in the Mishnah, is going to ask that it's obvious. And the Gemara says, Uriminu, when we have a contradiction from the following brisa, Milva mishtalemes b'chol makom. It says in the brisa, when it comes to a loan, that can be paid back anywhere. Avedo pikadon, when it comes to a lost object or a deposit, ein mishtalmen elo b'mekomen. Those can only be paid back in their place. And so here you see a distinction being made when it comes between a loan and when it comes to an aved and a pikadon. And in our Mishnah, there was no distinction whatsoever. It said lo yachzer lo b'midbar, and that seemed to apply everywhere. And the Gemara says, Amar Abaye says, Hachi Kamar, this is what we mean to say. Milva nitna litava b'chol makom. What we mean is that when it comes to a loan, it can be claimed anywhere. That's if the malva is claiming it. But avedo pikadon lo nitnu litava ela b'mekom. When it comes to a lost object or a deposit, they cannot be claimed except for in their place. And Rashi says, nitna litava, again, it could be claimed im yirtza malva, meaning if the lender wants to claim it in whatever place, the yado al helyon, in the case of a loan, so we say that the lender, he has the upper hand, so to speak, and he's able to make that claim anywhere. That would have nothing to do with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah has to do with the situation of returning it against the will of the person, meaning you're trying to return it to him in the midbar when he doesn't necessarily want it in the midbar. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Almanas lotzes b'midbar, let's say it's on condition, the end of the Mishnah said, if it's on condition to go to the midbar, so and then he's allowed to return in the midbar. And the Gemara asks, as Rashi said, Pshita, isn't that obvious? That was the condition. And the Gemara says, Lo no tzricha, it's necessary, do amar le, because the case is where he says to him as follows: Lahava hai pikadon gabach, let this pikadon be by you, da'ano lemidbar nafikna, because I am going out to the wilderness. Meaning to say, when the person, let's say, gives the pikadon to the other individual, the person giving the pikadon, the owner of the object, says, I want you to keep it because I'm going to the midbar. And then the response is v'yamar le, and then the response of the shomer is, he says to him, v'yamar le, when he says to him, ano lemidbar nami, ba'ina lemepak, I also want to go to the wilderness. And if I want to return it to you over there, then I will return it to you over there. There's a slight discrepancy here exactly what the girsa is. We'll take a look at Rashi. Now, the way Rashi has the girsa is not iba'ina, but rather it's ibois. If you want that I should return it to you over there, then I will do that. And the way Rashi understands v'ashme'inan tana, according to this understanding, the Tana is teaching us, because the question again is, isn't it obvious? But the Tana is teaching us, even though this is not really a typical full condition, the ha'iboy is coming because he said, if you want, nevertheless, since he knows that he's also going to the wilderness, even against his will, he has to accept it back in the midbar. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Ha'omer l'chaveru, if somebody says to his friend, Gazalti chilvisani hifkarata etzli, I stole from you, you lent me money, you gave me a deposit, meaning I owe you something. Ve'eni odeyem echzarti lach, but I don't know if I already returned it to you. Im lo echzarti lach, or if I didn't return it to you. So the Mishnah says, chayiv l'shalom, in that case he has to pay. The idea seems to be, since he acknowledges 100% that he actually owed something, now he's not sure if he returned it, he's got to pay. But if he says to him, I don't know if I stole from you. I don't know if you lent me money. If you deposited something by me, I'm not even sure if it happened initially. So then pater milashalim. In that case, the Mishnah says he is exempt. He is pater from paying. And the Gemara says, it was stated the following: Machlokas amoroim mana li biyadcha. Person says, there's a mana of mine in your hand. You owe me 100 dinar. V'halo omer eni odea. The other person says, I don't know if I owe you the money. It's essentially a case of a bari v'shema. The person claiming is certain. The person who owes is not sure. Rav Huna of Rav Yehuda Amri Chayev. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda say the individual is Chayev. Rav Nachman of Rav Yochanan Amri Pater. Rav Nachman and Rav Yochanan they say Pater. Rav Huna of Rav Yehuda Amri Chayev. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda they say Chayev because Bari v'Shema Bari Yod. If you have one side that's certain, you have another side that is in doubt, and so the person that's certain is going to prevail. Rav Nachman of Rav Yochanan Amri Rav Nachman and Rav Yochanan they both say Pater. The individual is Pater because of the idea of Uki v'Mona v'Cheskas Mari. The money should stay in the Chazaka where it is. You don't move the money if you are not sure. And so the Gemara wants to compare this machlokas amoraim to our Mishnah. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, avolim amar lo, if he says to him, eini yodea, that I don't know, im hilvisani, I don't know if there ever was a loan, pater. So then in that situation, the individual is pater. That's the line at the end of the Mishnah. If I don't know at all whether there was even an owing of the money, he is exempt. And so the Gemara wants to clarify, hey, what exactly is the case at the end of the Mishnah? Ilema de lo katavale. If you're going to say that the case is that there's no claim being made, meaning there's no one that's saying you owe me money, it's just this person volunteering the information, I don't know if I owe you money. If that's the case, in which case it would not really be connected to the machlokas amorem above. But if that is the case, so then you have to say reisha nami de lo katavale. You're going to have to say that in the beginning of the Mishnah as well, where he does acknowledge that he stole, he does acknowledge that he owes the money in some fashion. You're going to have to say over there also there's no claim being made. But if that's the case, am I chayiv? But if that's the case, why would he be chayiv? If the other side is not claiming anything, and he is simply saying, I'm acknowledging that I stole something, or I'm acknowledging that I borrowed, I'm acknowledging there was a bikonim, but I don't know, and the other side is claiming nothing, why should he be chayiv? So ela de katavale. Rather, you're going to say that the early part of the Mishnah, the reish of the Mishnah, certainly is talking about where there's a claim being made against him, and yet if that's the case, then the end of the Mishnah is also talking about a claim. The katani seifa pater milashalim, and if the end of the Mishnah is talking about essentially a claim being made, meaning the toveya is a bari, it is exactly a case of bari v'shema. And what does it say? It says pater milashalim. It says bari v'shema. He doesn't have to pay. That would seem to be consistent with the view of Rav Nachman and Rav Yochanan that we say there's a chazaka over here that he doesn't have to pay. And the Gemara says, lo no, liolam de lo katavale. Really the case is where there is no claim being made against him. That would explain why the seifa has nothing to do with the machlokas amoraim. There is no claim, that's why he's pater in the seifa. The problem again is if there's no claim being made, why is he chayiv in the reisha? And to that the Gemara says simply, v'reisha b'bo lotzeis yidei shamayim. The reisha is talking about a situation where the person wants to fulfill his obligation in terms of heaven, his heavenly obligations. Of course, here in a bezdin in a bezin in front of us, so the bezin's not going to be mechayev him, but he wants to be lotzei sidei shamayim, he wants to be yotzei his heavenly obligations, and that's why it's saying in the Reisha he's chayev to pay. If he acknowledges the fact that he owed the money, he's not sure if he paid back, lotzei sidei shamayim, he is chayev. And the Gemara says Itmar Nami was stated like that as well. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Ha'omer lechaveru, if somebody says to his friend, Mona li biyadcha, that you owe me money, v'halomer, the other person says, Eini yodeya, I don't know if I owe you or not. So here you have a similar kind of idea, chayiv bevo, lotzes yedei shamayim. He is chayiv if he's trying to fulfill his heavenly obligations. And this, of course, is Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan in general says pater. He says generally, uki mamona, beches kasmari. We don't say bari v'shem bari adif in general. But if it's Baal Lotzes Yedei Shamayim, if he wants to fulfill his heavenly obligations, even Rabbi Yochanan would say Chayiv in that situation for that purpose. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hagonev Telemin Ha'eder, if somebody steals a lamb from a flock, Vechziro Vameso Nignav, and then he returns it, and then the animal dies or it's stolen, Chayiv Achar Yusa, so he's Chayiv in that situation, he has to take responsibility. The idea over there is that he did not return it and let the owner know that he returned it, and that's why he is still responsible. It is not considered to be a good Chazara of the item. But the Mishnah says, Lo Yadu Bailam, let's say the owners were not aware, Lo Bignevaso, Velo Bechaziraso. They were not aware that it was stolen in the first place, and they were not aware that it was returned. And then he returns it without telling the owner, Umanu Esatzon, and the owner counts his sheep, Ushleimi, and everything is whole. It ends up that he sees that nothing is lost. Once he does that counting, so then the person who stole it is Pater, he's exempt, he has done a good Chazara. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav, Rav says as follows, there's going to be a machlokas amoroim here, in which situations is a person responsible, in which is he not responsible, what's considered a good chazara, and what is not considered a good chazara. And so Rav says, Ladas, if it's a situation where the owners realize that it was stolen, so then sarach das, so then when you return it, they have to realize that you're returning it. But shalo ladas, but if the person is not aware that it was stolen, so then minyan poter, so then just the act of counting the sheep and the owner realizing that he has all his sheep, that is considered enough, and the gazlan is exempt, that's considered a chazara in that situation. And according to Rav, so according to Rav, when it says in the Mishnah, umanu esatzon v'hi shalema, that he counted the sheep and he found that everything was whole, aseva, that's going on the end of the Mishnah, meaning to say, the end of the Mishnah is a case where he did not know that it was stolen, and in a situation where he did not know it was stolen, that's where umanu esatzon is sufficient. But in the ratio of the Mishnah where he knew it was stolen, so then we say that manu esatzon is not sufficient, that's tzarech das, he needs to know that you returned it. That's how Rav understands the Mishnah. Ushmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, Bein ladas, bein shalo ladas, it doesn't make a difference whether the person knew it was stolen from him, whether he did not know it was stolen from him, minyan poter. If a person counts and he finds everything is whole, in that situation, the gazlan is going to be exempt. That's considered a good chazara. And according to Shmuel, v'chi katani umanu v'shlema poter, when it says in the Mishnah that if he counts the sheep and he finds everything whole, then the gazlan is poter. Akula, according to Shmuel, that's going on the entire Mishnah. That's a general halacha. If you have a situation of manu esatzon u'shleimahi, that's always enough to exempt the gazlan. That's Shmuel's view. Now we have a third view for Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, ladas, if it was stolen and the owner knew that it was stolen, minyan poter, so then counting is actually going to be effective and the gazlan is exempt. Shalo ladas, but let's say it was stolen and the owner was not aware, afilu minyan nami lo tzarech, then you don't even need to have a counting. Then it's enough simply to return it, and even without the counting, the person will be poter. And according to this view of Rabbi Yochanan, v'chi katani umanu esatzon v'hishlema, when the Mishnah says that he counts it and then he finds it to be whole and we say poter, that's our ratio. That's going on the case of ladas, because again, according to Rabbi Yochanan, if the owner knows, that's specifically when we say that counting is considered to be a good chazara. And finally, we have the opinion of Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda Amar, Rav Chisda says, ladas, if the situation is that it was stolen with the knowledge of the owner, so minyan poter, so then counting is going to exempt. But shalo ladas, but let's say it was stolen without the knowledge of the owner, so then it's exactly the opposite. Then actually it's tzarech das. Then it's not enough to have a counting. There already you are going to need the das. You're going to need the knowledge of the owner when you return it for it to be considered a good chazara. And according to Rav Chisda, when it says that if he counts it and he counts the sheep and he finds it whole, and then we say that the gazlan is exempt, our ratio that is specifically going again on the first part of the Mishnah. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava, Rava says, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ches Amud Beis.